businesses. Not in all areas, but in areas that are to our advantage. And that's part of what we will scope out over the course of the next few months in advance of my visit. But again, to come back to a relationship as opposed to a transaction, what you do with a relationship is then you make progress on certain things and then you move on to the next issues and you build on that. And that's what is now unlocked, which was not the case 24 hours ago.
Next question.
Steve Chase, Globe and Mail. Right. We're still trying to take the full measure of your policy towards China, so I'll ask you about the Indo-Pacific policy, the government's Indo-Pacific policy. It calls China an increasingly disruptive global power. Do you stand by that statement? Do you agree with that statement? Do you think that's still the way it should be expressed?
I think that, following Steve, one is that there are different aspects of disruption. One is economic disruption. We see that in terms of Chinese competitiveness in certain areas, market dominance in other areas. I mean, issues with critical minerals, for example, overcapacity in certain, say, steel would be another example of that, where those are disruptive facts that we are adjusting to as Canada. What are we and actually flips around. So the critical mineral side, enormous opportunity for Canada. Enormous opportunity for Canada because the world wakes up and realizes not to have all their eggs in one basket, lesson we're learning as well with the United States. So a chance for us to build out. And, you know, I'll just reference that yesterday, I'll get my dates right, but October 31st, the Minister of Natural Resources, Minister Hodgson, was hosting the G7 in Toronto. He says hesitant, in somewhere in Canada. I think it was in Toronto. I know the run-up to the meeting and the outcome, where more than 20 critical mineral agreements were signed, almost $2 billion worth of investment. The vast majority involving Canadian companies is G7, but the vast majority of Canadian companies and things in Canada. So that disruption that comes from China brings also opportunity. That's the economic disruption. I think, look, we're clear-eyed about the issues in the Indo-Pacific, the issues more broadly from a geostrategic perspective. We have pragmatic engagement with China, there are areas where we will engage and cooperate, and there's others where, again, in a relationship, we can establish an ability to make our views known directly to them.
Follow-up?
Your predecessor came in 10 years ago intending to open a new glorious chapter of relations with China as well. In fact, he wanted to sign a free trade deal. But one of the things that happened, it wasn't just the imprisonment of the Michaels, it was investment restrictions, it was restrictions on collaboration. They blocked the flagship Huawei from Canadian wireless. They fenced off significant portions of the Canadian industry. They restricted funding for any collaboration with Chinese state and military institutions. Were any of those things wrong, and are you going to revisit the restrictions on Chinese investment in Canada?
Look, first thing, what's done is done. I mean, the past is the past, and the question is where you look moving forward. Part of the approach, certainly that I will take, and I think the expectation from President Xi, Premier Li, from the Chinese side, is to be clear what are the areas where we can cooperate, and what are the areas where we wouldn't. What are the sensitive areas in terms of inbound investment from China, or from their perspective, Canadian investment or activity in China. And there is a very large area. I don't think they're particularly. I didn't ask them the question yesterday. It wasn't to get down to this level of detail, but you know, Lululemon or Canada Goose into China. I think that's okay. Certain elements of cyber cooperation and others in China or in Canada. That's a different issue. So it's being clear on where they are. I'm not going to spell them all out right now. It's part of the engagement.
Next question.
Okay.
Hi, Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg. Last year, your predecessor put tariffs on pretty steep tariffs on 3 Chinese products, essentially: steel, aluminum, electric vehicles. The readout after your meeting yesterday said You discussed solutions to some of these irritants. It did not say steel and aluminum. It did say electric vehicles. So should we take that to mean steel and aluminum are off the table here, but Canada's tariffs on EVs, that is something you're willing to look at and revisit?
The way I would frame it, and it's early days, so I don't want to get too far ahead. There are questions about where our cooperation is in energy, and I'm going to use energy in the broadest sense, and I'll be a little more specific now. But it's part of the way to have the relationship is okay. Where are we going in energy? PetroChina, Chinese oil company, is one of the purchasers of LNG from what's called LNG-1, the first of those I referenced in my remarks. I think they're 15%. There's a variety. The Korean gas company, Petronas in Malaysia, also purchases. There's a range. Shell would be another. So there's a relationship there in LNG. There's a relationship for some of our oil exports. Actually, I may have got that wrong. It may be on the TMX. Sorry, I apologize. I'll come back and give you the. You can go on Bloomberg and you can figure it out. That's one aspect of energy cooperation. Another aspect of energy cooperation is what potential role will Canadian uranium exports play, big nuclear, and the Canadian nuclear sector and the Chinese nuclear sector, given the scale of their build-out and given our expertise, including in SMRs. On the other side, from a Canadian perspective, we are building out. We have one of the big advantages we have in Canada is this: we basically have a clean grid, or almost a clean grid, and the question is, how do we then take that to the next level for electrification of our economy? For, if we're going to have more EVs, we need more clean electricity, or it doesn't really make sense to do that. For clean manufacturing, for AI data centers and all those other aspects. We have big hydro, for example, Churchill Falls. We have big nuclear in Ontario. We have some investments in BC as well. But there also will be conventional renewables, solar in particular, wind, offshore wind. One of the projects of national interest is Wind West off Nova Scotia, potentially 50 or 60 gigawatts of wind. For that, you also need storage capacity. So it's a long answer, but you asked for it. You need storage capacity. Some of the most competitive companies in the world are Chinese in both offshore wind and in battery storage. It's a natural potential area for cooperation even before you get to EVs. And of course, there is a competitive. They're very competitive in EVs, but the EV component is part of a bigger restructuring of our auto sector. So we'll proceed carefully with that.
Follow-up.
And I also just wanted to ask you about, there was a lot of talk on this trip about submarine procurement, obviously. You visited a shipyard. I wanted to ask you about fighter jets.